On the third day after his daughter disappeared, this man dragged the suspect straight into a freezing bathroom. He had no help from the police and no solid evidence. All he had was the rage of a father who had lost his daughter, and a madness that would not stop until he forced out the truth. He used every method he could to torture the man, throwing punch after punch to vent his anger, but none of it could calm the emotions that were driving him to the edge.
You're doing this to yourself. Tell me! Tell me! Tell me! Where's my daughter? Where's my daughter?
On Thanksgiving Day, Keller brought his family to a friend's house for dinner. But what should have been a warm holiday gathering was soon shattered by an accident. Keller's daughter Anna wanted to go outside and play. After getting her father's permission, she went out with her friend Joy. After the two girls went outside, they saw a strange RV parked by the road. Out of curiosity, they wanted to climb onto the roof and play. But not long after that, both children completely vanished. Keller waited inside for a long time, but his daughter never came back. He immediately returned to his own house to look for her, only to find it completely empty. He then asked his son, who was in the basement, but his son said he had never seen Anna come back. Before Anna left, Keller had clearly told her to have her brother walk her home. After searching every nearby place where the girls could have hidden and finding nothing, both families immediately started to panic. At that moment, Anna's brother Ralph remembered the RV the girls had mentioned earlier, so he took his father to look for it, but the vehicle was already gone. After confirming that his son remembered the specific details of the RV, Keller immediately pulled out his phone and called the police. After receiving the report, Detective Loki quickly led a full search across the entire town and eventually found an RV matching the description at a remote intersection. Just as everyone was about to move in and search it, the vehicle suddenly started. The driver jerked the wheel and tried to escape, but slammed headfirst into a tree. Loki slowly approached the RV with his gun raised and quickly took control of the driver hiding inside, the suspect Alex. However, after the police carefully searched the vehicle, they did not find the two missing little girls inside. Back at the police station, Loki immediately began interrogating Alex, but Alex's eyes looked vacant. No matter how Loki questioned him, he insisted that he had never seen the two little girls. At the same time, the forensic team conducted a full examination of the RV, but they also found nothing. This made Loki even more confused. If Alex was truly innocent, why did he run the moment he saw the police? But if he was the kidnapper, why was there no trace of the girls left in the RV? To figure out what was going on, Loki used the information he had found and went to Alex's aunt's house to ask about him. His aunt said Alex had lost both parents when he was young and had an intellectual disability. His mental capacity was only about that of a 10-year-old child, so he simply did not have the ability to plan such a careful kidnapping. After hearing her explanation, Loki realized that Alex's strange reaction did not necessarily mean he was guilty. After checking Alex's room, Loki found nothing unusual, so he decided to leave. But once he went outside, he noticed an unused car parked in the middle of the yard. It seemed a little strange, but Loki did not think it had anything to do with the case, so he paid no attention to it. At this point, the investigation still had no key clues, so Loki could only expand the search to the woods surrounding the town. But after a full day and night, the police still found nothing. After daybreak, Loki went to Keller's house to update him on the case. Loki told Keller that Alex was mentally impaired and did not have the ability to plan a precise kidnapping. Even the polygraph results showed that he was not lying. And because the police had found no direct evidence proving Alex committed the crime, the law only allowed them to hold him temporarily for 48 hours. But Keller refused to accept that conclusion. In his mind, if Alex was truly innocent, why did he run when he saw the police? And to Keller, the police dismissing Alex as a suspect so quickly was nothing but incompetence. Facing Keller's furious accusations, Loki had no way to argue, so he could only leave helplessly. But Keller chased him outside and begged the police department to keep Alex locked up for one more day. That way, his daughter's chance of surviving might be a little higher. After returning to the station, Loki passed Keller's request on to the chief. The chief agreed, but also ordered him to solve the case as quickly as possible. Loki did not dare waste a second. He immediately began going door to door around the area where the girls disappeared, hoping to catch any useful clue from what the townspeople had seen or heard. When he arrived at the town priest's house, no one answered after he knocked for a long time. Then he walked to the window and looked inside, only to see someone lying on the floor. Worried that something had happened to him, Loki immediately broke in. But when he got closer, he realized the priest was only asleep, and finally let out a breath of relief. He then looked around the house. After confirming that nothing seemed unusual, he was about to leave, but then he noticed signs that the refrigerator had been moved. When he kindly pushed the refrigerator back into place, he unexpectedly discovered a hidden door to a secret room behind it. Loki jumped into the hidden room and searched carefully. Inside, he found a dried-up corpse that had been lying there for a long time, with a unique maze pendant still hanging around its neck. Loki immediately took the drunk priest back to the police station for questioning. and the priest finally confessed what had happened many years ago. Years earlier, a man had come to the church to confess. He said he had harmed 16 children and wanted God's forgiveness. After hearing about the man's crimes against children, the priest was instantly filled with rage. But he did not call the police. Instead, he locked the man in the cellar and eventually let him starve to death down there. Loki had doubts about the priest's story, so he kept him in custody for the time being and continued checking the related leads. Just as the 2-day holding period was about to expire, Alex was suddenly released early. Keller, who was still searching everywhere for his daughter, heard the news and immediately abandoned the search effort, rushing to the police station. At that moment, Alex had just walked out of the station when Keller, completely out of control, tackled him to the ground. In the chaos, Alex suddenly said something in a very low voice. "They only cried after I left them." Hearing this made Keller even more certain that the children's disappearance had to be connected to Alex. But Loki and the chief saw it differently. In their view, the real killer would never deliberately say something that exposed himself like that. This made Keller feel that the police were only protecting a disabled man and did not care about the missing children at all. So he turned and walked straight out of the station. But since Keller had provided a relevant lead, Loki still decided to make the trip and question Alex face to face. After testing him indirectly for a while, Alex's answers still never changed, so Loki had no choice but to give up. When Keller returned home and saw his wife crying all day, he completely gave up waiting for the police investigation and decided to look for his daughter himself. That night, Keller waited outside Alex's house. He quietly followed Alex and heard him humming a nursery rhyme. It was the same song his daughter had sung before she disappeared. Keller completely lost control. He raised the gun in his hand and forcibly abducted Alex. Early the next morning, Keller found his friend Franklin and brought him to an abandoned old house in the suburbs. This was a property left behind by Keller's father, and it had been abandoned for years. Franklin still did not know what Keller was planning to do. But after walking into the old house, he saw Alex tied up on the floor, and his face changed instantly. Franklin said directly that illegally holding someone captive was a crime, especially since the police had already determined that Alex was not a suspect. Seeing this, Keller told Franklin all the suspicious details. He was convinced the police could no longer be trusted, and if they wanted to save the two girls, they had to find the truth themselves. After a fierce inner struggle, Franklin eventually chose to stand with Keller to find their daughters as soon as possible. The two men began brutally forcing Alex to talk, but he remained completely silent. Meanwhile, Loki uncovered an important lead. Alex's RV was often parked in front of an empty house, and every time it stayed there for a long time before leaving. Loki followed that lead and learned that the former owner of the house had lost his son 26 years earlier. The old man could not bear the pain of losing his child, so he moved away from that heartbreaking place. The repeated disappearances of children made Loki realize that something much bigger was going on. There seemed to be some hidden connection between these cases, but for now he still had not found the key clue that could tie everything together. So Loki questioned the priest again, trying to find a link between the old missing child case and the current disappearance of the two girls. Unfortunately, the priest did not know the man in the cellar at all, so there was no way to identify him. The investigation fell into another dead end. Back at the old house, Keller was still torturing Alex, but Alex still had not revealed where his daughter was. Keller's emotions grew more and more tense and anxious, until he finally lost control completely. Keller knew very well that if this dragged on any longer, his daughter might have no chance of surviving. The two girls had now been missing for 3 full days and nights. The people in town organized a prayer vigil on their own, silently praying for them to come home safely. Loki, who was patrolling nearby, looked at the scene in front of him with a deeply complicated feeling. At that moment, Loki noticed a man in the crowd acting strangely. Loki only looked at him a few more times, but the man jumped up and ran as if he had been startled. Seeing this, Loki immediately chased after him, but the man was quick and agile, and soon disappeared from his sight. Afterward, Loki drew the suspect's face from memory and released a wanted notice on television. Not long after, the police received a report from a department store clerk. The clerk said the man in the sketch often came to the store to buy children's clothes, and every time he bought them in different sizes. This new lead gave Loki a surge of hope. He believed the man was very likely the real culprit who kidnapped the girls. On the other side, after Franklin saw the wanted notice on the news, he became even more convinced that Alex was innocent. He once again urged Keller to stop the torture, but Keller remained firm. He was certain Alex knew where his daughter was. Franklin was deeply tormented inside, and finally told his wife Nancy the secret that they were holding Alex captive. Then the couple went to the old house with Keller. After seeing Alex tortured beyond recognition, Nancy took out a photo of the missing girls. Out of kindness, she tried to awaken Alex's conscience. Unexpectedly, Alex suddenly pushed her down and even tried to escape through the window. Fortunately, Keller and Franklin reacted quickly and worked together to subdue him again. This attempted escape completely destroyed the last bit of sanity Keller had left. He locked Alex inside a homemade confinement box, then connected cold water and hot water pipes to it. Keller planned to torture him with freezing water and hot water in turns until Alex finally talked. Franklin could no longer bear it. He said Keller had the wrong man and was about to release Alex right away. Seeing this, his wife reminded him that their own daughter was still missing. Franklin eventually stopped, but he also decided that from that moment on he would no longer take part in Keller's torture. At this point, it seems someone had broken into Keller's house. His wife heard the noise and got up to check, only to find signs that a window had been pried open, but there was no one inside the house. Worried that this might be connected to her daughter's disappearance, she contacted Loki immediately. Loki arrived and carefully examined the scene, but apart from an open window, he found no other suspicious traces. There was also no sign of anyone hiding in the basement. But when Loki asked where Keller was, his wife said her husband had been leaving early and coming home late recently because he was helping the police with the case. Loki immediately saw through the lie and guessed that Alex's disappearance was very likely connected to Keller. So Loki began following Keller, but the sharp Keller quickly noticed the police car tailing him. However, he did not turn around and run. Instead, he walked straight up to Loki himself. Seeing this, Loki stopped talking in circles and directly questioned him about Alex's whereabouts. But Keller was not nervous at all. Instead, he questioned why Loki was not looking for the two missing girls and why he was wasting time searching for a suspect who had already been released. For a moment, Loki had no answer. After shaking off Loki's surveillance, Keller carried out even more brutal revenge on Alex. But as he listened to Alex's screams again and again, Keller himself sank into deep confusion, because while he was torturing another person, he was also torturing himself. Just then, Alex finally forced out two broken sentences. He said his name was not Alex, and that he had been waiting for Alex, but Alex never came. Keller hurriedly pressed him for the specific details, but Alex fell silent again. Desperate, Keller turned the hot water valve again, and the horrifying screams once more echoed through the empty old house. But to find his daughter, Keller had no regrets, even if it meant turning himself into a monster. At this time, Loki followed the clues and found the old house where Keller was. Inside, Keller heard movement outside the door and immediately warned Alex not to make a sound. Then he pretended to be drunk and lay down on the floor. After Loki climbed in through the window, he saw Keller lying on the floor and immediately said he wanted to search the house floor by floor. Just as he was about to discover the imprisoned Alex, his phone suddenly rang. It was the department store clerk. The clerk said the wanted man had appeared again to buy children's clothes, and also gave Loki the man's license plate number. With this key lead, Loki had no time to continue the search. He immediately turned and rushed to the scene. Loki traced the license plate to a house, and the man who opened the door was Bob, the same man who had run from him earlier. When Bob saw the police, he immediately tried to shut the door. Loki stepped forward and restrained him, and only after Bob became more cooperative did Loki continue searching the house. When Loki entered one room, he found the entire wall covered with strange maze drawings. In the inner room, several black wooden boxes were stacked up, each large enough to hold a child. But when he pried the boxes open one by one, he found blood-stained children's clothes scattered inside, and a large number of black snakes coiled at the bottom. Inside the last box was a notebook. On the cover was a line that read, "If you make it through the maze, you can go home." The pages were also filled with complicated maze patterns. To find out where the girls had gone, Loki brought Bob back to the station. He also photographed the blood-stained children's clothes inside the boxes, and called Keller and Franklin in to identify them. Keller immediately recognized one sock as belonging to his daughter, and the crushing blow nearly broke him mentally. But he still refused to give up. Giving up now would mean his daughter had no way to survive, so he told his son to keep this quiet and went back to continue questioning Alex. In the interrogation room, Bob had an intellectual disability just like Alex. He ignored every police question, focusing only on drawing maze patterns on paper while repeating, "Make it through the maze and you get your freedom." Bob's disturbing state completely enraged Loki. He rushed into the interrogation room and raised his fists to hit Bob, but the surrounding officers pulled him away in time. During the chaos, Bob seized a police gun and shot himself in front of everyone. At the same time, Alex inside the old house also said the same thing about the maze, but Keller had no idea what the maze was supposed to mean. So he made a special trip to Alex's aunt's house, hoping to get clues about the maze from the old woman, but she kept talking to herself, as if deliberately avoiding Keller's questions. Back at the police station, Bob's death threw the case into another dead end. Loki felt deeply frustrated and smashed everything on his desk. After venting his anger, Loki began organizing the evidence, but accidentally made a new discovery. The maze pattern Bob had drawn was exactly the same as the pattern on the pendant worn by the dried corpse in the cellar. The police immediately searched Bob's house again and finally discovered the truth about the maze. It turned out that Bob had suffered severe psychological trauma, and at one point became obsessed with a game called maze killing. The blood found on the clothes at the scene was not human blood, it was pig's blood. The police dug up the mannequins in the yard, and the bloody clothes were all fake evidence Bob had planted. He had only staged a kidnapping and was not the real kidnapper. After finishing the maze drawing at the police station, he believed he had completed the entire maze process, which was why he chose to kill himself. Based on the earlier report from Keller's wife, Loki also found footprints downstairs in Keller's house, along with the other missing girl's sock that Bob had thrown away. But this only proved that the socks had been stolen by Bob. The many old cases connected by the maze pattern were still buried in fog. Keller's daughter had been missing for more than a week, He had gone from panic to anger, and now he had become almost numb. Then a piece of good news suddenly came in. The police had successfully found Franklin's daughter. Keller and his wife hurried to the hospital. If Joy was awake, she might be able to provide a useful clue. But when Joy saw Keller in front of her, she suddenly remembered what had happened. She had heard Keller's voice back then. After hearing this, Keller instantly understood the hidden truth. He rushed out of the hospital and drove straight toward the place where his daughter was being held. Loki followed close behind. He chased Keller to the abandoned old house, but Keller was nowhere to be found. Then a faint cry for help came from the second floor. Loki followed the sound upstairs and unexpectedly found Alex, who had been imprisoned there for a long time. Meanwhile, Keller knocked on the door of Alex's aunt's house. During this period, he had been staying at the old house and had only gone to Alex's aunt's house once, so Joy had very likely heard his voice here. So he concluded that this old woman was the mastermind behind all the evil. But the moment he walked inside, he fell into her trap. She had already known he would come looking for her, so she was prepared. After forcing Keller to drink the drugged liquid, the old woman stopped pretending and slowly revealed the secret that had been buried for 26 years. Back then, her child had died tragically. The pain of losing a child filled her and her deeply religious husband with hatred. So they began kidnapping children everywhere as a way to declare war on God. They forced the kidnapped children to take part in a cruel maze hunting game. The rules were brutal. Only by killing the other children could they find the exit and regain their freedom. But no one could truly escape this mental maze. In the end, every child became mentally broken. Alex and Bob were both victims of the kidnappings. Bob was lucky enough to escape, but his mind had been so badly damaged that he could never recover. After killing 16 children, her husband could no longer live with his conscience and wanted to end the evil, but she strongly refused. In a fit of anger, he left home and was never heard from again. The old woman told Keller to move his car, then opened the hidden cellar entrance in the yard. Then she forced Keller to jump into the cellar to look for his daughter and sealed the entrance behind him. After dealing with Keller's car, the old woman used the unused old car to pin the cellar entrance down completely. No matter how Keller struggled, he could not escape. Inside the pitch-black cellar, Keller felt his way forward by the faint light and unexpectedly found the red whistle his daughter had been carrying. This proved that his daughter had indeed been trapped there before, but there was still no sign of her anywhere. Keller fell into complete despair. At the same time, after finishing matters at the old house, Loki came to Alex's aunt's house to tell her that Alex had been rescued. But the lights were on and no one was inside, which made Loki feel something was wrong. Then an old photo on the table caught his eye. The man in the photo was wearing a pendant exactly like the one on the dried corpse in the cellar. Only then did Loki realize the old woman was connected to the serial killer. He immediately pulled out his gun and searched the house carefully. At that moment, the old woman was preparing to inject Keller's daughter with poison, but luckily Loki arrived just in time to stop her. The old woman knew she could not escape that day, so she raised her gun and fired. Although Loki managed to shoot her dead, he was also wounded. But he ignored the pain, picked up Anna, and rushed her all the way to the hospital. In the end, Anna was successfully treated and survived. However, Keller was still missing. Because he had illegally imprisoned someone, the police concluded that he had fled to avoid punishment. But Keller's wife refused to believe that. She begged Loki again and again to help find her husband. That night, Loki returned to the old woman's yard with the police to collect evidence, since she and her husband had once killed 16 children. Looking at this place covered in evil, Loki was filled with countless emotions. Just as he was about to leave, a faint whistle came in broken bursts from underground. At first, Loki thought it was an illusion, but then the whistle sounded again. That faint sound became the only hope in the darkness. Keller had finally waited long enough for a chance to be saved. Keller had originally been nothing more than a father who had lost his daughter, but pushed by despair and rage, he slowly became another abuser himself. And Prisoners has never been just about one kidnapping case. Through a tragedy, it questions the human heart. The strongest prison in this world is never made of iron bars, but of hatred, obsession, and uncontrolled desire growing inside the human heart.